in two different ways, as a heat source and as an energy source. Solar panels are used to convert sunlight into energy. It is used mainly in residential places, but also some commercial places, for heating water and air.
The photons from the sun hit the solar panels, which generates direct current.
And then the inverter converts direct current to alternating current, which is ready to be used by household appliances.
This current then goes through the main switchboard of the building and is used to supply electricity to the building.
Conversely, electricity is important from the grid whenever there isn't enough solar-generated electricity for the building's load.
Any excess electricity is then exported to the grid.
Yeah.
They are good alternative sources because solar panels are non-polluting. However, they don't produce a lot of energy and they're very costly.
The energy released from the nuclear reaction is in the form of heat. This heat energy is put into water to be turned into steam, which then turns the turbine, which produces electricity. The cooling towers help the cool rods to cool down. Advantages of nuclear power energy is that nuclear power energy does emit relatively low amounts of carbon dioxide. The emissions of greenhouse gases and therefore the contribution of nuclear power plants to global warming is therefore relatively little. This technology is readily available. It does not have to be developed first. It is possible to generate a high amount of electrical energy in one single plant.
Although there are many disadvantages of a nuclear power generation, the problem of radioactive waste is still an unsolved one. The waste from nuclear energy is extremely dangerous and it has to be carefully looked after for several thousand years. The high risks. It is technically impossible to build a plant with 100% security. A small probability of failure will always last. The consequences of an accident would be absolutely devastating both for human beings as for the nature. The more nuclear power plants that are built, the higher the probability of a disastrous failure somewhere in the world. Nuclear power plants, as well as nuclear waste, could be preferred targets for terrorist attacks. No atomic energy plant in the world could ever withstand an attack similar to 9/11 in New York. Such a terrorist attack would have catastrophic effects for the whole world.
Hello, we're doing our project on biomass. Here to explain how biomass works is E-Time.
Okay, so this drawing shows us one example of how biomass can be used. Biomass actually is just anything that's organic or living that's on the earth. Things that can be used to make biomass energy are alcohol, waste fuel, waste gases, and just wood and plants. So this example shows wood. So we start with wood waste, for example, wood chips, which are transported to the power plant, where they can be combusted and used to make electricity, which produces CO2, which goes back into the trees. Here to talk to you about the advantages of biomass is Amy.
So its advantages are that it's a renewable source of energy, and its energy helps in cleanliness in villages and cities. It's relatively cheaper and more reliable, and the recycling of waste reduces pollution and spread of diseases. Here to talk to you about the disadvantages is Abby.
So one of the worst disadvantages of using biomass energy is that the cost of construction of a biogas plant is high, so only rich people can use it. Also, a continuous supply of biomass is required to generate biomass energy. Also, biogas plants requires a space and produces a dirty smell because it's usually like trash and stuff that doesn't smell very nice. And finally, transportation of biogas through pipe over a long distance is difficult, so it would be hard to distribute the energy to the masses. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is thermal energy generated and stored in the earth. As a result of the great heat, the amount of thermal energy stored is enormous, approximately equivalent to 79 million barrels of oil, in fact. Essentially, you drill a hole into the ground, inject water, which rapidly heats up and transforms into steam, and which can now be used to power turbines. The pros of using this method of producing energy is that zero carbon is produced, no fuel is required, and it is one of the more stable forms of alternative energy, because unlike solar and wind energy, it is not subject to fluctuation. Also, there is a virtually limitless supply. Unfortunately, it is difficult and expensive to drill into heated rock. Thank you.
Today I'm going to tell you about hydroelectric power. Hydroelectric power is generated through the kinetic energy from water going through a penstock, down to a turbine, and through a generator. First, water from the other side of the dam goes down the penstock, through the turbine, up the generator into the powerhouse, and then it goes through the transformer, which is a little bit more complicated. The sluice gates are one of the main components of hydroelectric power generation. Sluice gates are located at the highest point possible in a dam, because the bigger the height difference between the upstream and downstream water level, the greater the amount of electricity generated. After the water goes through the turbine, it goes through the downstream outlet and to the other side of the dam. This is a very efficient power generation process. Some of the advantages of hydroelectric power is that there's always a constant production rate of electricity. The sluice gates can be closed or open to stop or continue the production of electricity, so you don't waste energy. Fuel is not burned, so there's no pollution to the air, meaning that there's no CO2 in the air. Because the disadvantages are that dams are costly. They modify the habitats of natural life and animals, and valleys must be flooded to make reservoirs. Therefore, people must evacuate their homes, businesses,